Hello, Jacob Appelbaum. You just had a talk with Dimitri Kleiner on social networks and surveillance. We're at Republica conference, and at the opening thesis speech, Eben Moglen talked about how social networks are becoming centralized and surveillance. You kind of had it, and we need to build decentralized alternatives. You just open up a different perspective with Dimitri that the entire internet started out as a kind of social network that's always been decentralized, and it only became centralized and surveillance in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. Can you elaborate on that? Why is that, and how can we fight it?
Well, I think so. I think that there's always been a certain amount of surveillance, but the question is the scale of the surveillance. And in the last 10 years, the surveillance, especially from people and groups like the NSA, that's the National Security Agency of the United States of America, those groups have gained a lot of power. There's a radical expansion of that power. So on the one hand, that is a reality now that we live in, which is that the internet is a surveillance machine, not necessarily by design, but certainly it is possible because all of the communication systems are dumbed down into small protocols that are easily identified and looked at in some way. And the fact that we started out with distributed protocols came from the fact that we were trying to build an internet that would resist a whole bunch of failures. So like if a city just fell off, the map one day, either because of atomic war, which threatens all life on the planet, or because of an accident or something like this, right? And so in a sense, we did start with distributed systems. I mean, it actually started with small islands that became distributed so that the islands could function together. And this is something we actually have had and we are starting to lose, but we still have it actually. It is not the case that we have lost it entirely, but it is the case that many people today may have not experienced the distributed nature of the internet. And so I think the picture we painted is complementary to what Eben says, which is that we need to build alternatives. What we have learned is that what we had built before was not the only thing, and there are new things we need to consider in the services or ideas that we implement, and that's the really valuable thing, right? So it's not that Facebook didn't give us anything to offer. It showed the power of the network effect. Now how do we take that power and make sure that it doesn't just lie with one unaccountable body that is also subservient to a state which has very bad privacy laws, right? And so I think what he's talking about and what we're talking about, they are very much connected. I do think that Dima had a good point, which is that Eben talks about us coming from a centralized system to a distributed system, and it's important to talk about the actual history of coming from distributed systems, and there's a branch with a centralized system, and there's also still this line of distributed systems that exist together. In fact, Facebook couldn't exist without the distributed DNS system. It wouldn't be possible to have that without the free software communities driving, for example, the web servers or whatever behind Facebook. So Facebook, even though it is a centralized service, it's made up of many decentralized things. So the fact that some of the recognition goes to centralized services, and in fact a lot, like this month, billions of dollars of recognition go to that centralized service, it is not in itself the only reality, and in fact we have these parallel things that exist, and many people experience different ones. And Facebook is one, or Twitter is another one, where building alternatives to that will allow people to do the things that those services offer, but maybe not have the same trade-offs. And I think that's very powerful, and I think Dimitri had very eloquent things to say about how we have to view this in terms of collective struggle. And it's not just about Facebook, it's also about childcare, which sounds a little weird, but you have to remember that the trade-off there is about all of the things where we have public space and public utility, and we actually have a society, not just a collection of serfdoms. And so I think that, I really respect both of those guys for what they've had to say.
So what are the alternatives? How do we build them, and how do we get the people to use them?
Well, for example, thanks. Oh, no sugar for me, thanks. Yeah. So I think, that's some strong coffee. The question is, what are the alternatives? And I think part of it is a process of discovery. We don't always know what the alternatives are. For Twitter, there's StatusNet. This is the possibility for you to run this distributed protocol for federated microblogging. For instant messaging, you have stuff like, in the early days of instant messaging, you had like talk on Unix systems, which I don't think people really talk about that as instant messaging, but I met many friends over talk on Unix systems. That was, sort of superseded by AOL Instant Messenger, for example, and a lot of people use that, or QQ or ICQ or whatever, right? And now I think one of the big alternatives that exists there is Jabber. Most people know this as Google Chat, but Google Chat interacts with all of the other Jabber servers in the world in the same way that email does. So actually, instant messaging has taken on to an architecture that is a lot like email, but it has a different usage pattern. And this is actually good because it actually can contribute to privacy enhancing stuff. So for example, you can use off-the-record messaging combined with Jabber, say like jabber.ccc.de, one of the most popular Jabber servers that I know of, other than Google actually. And you can have really good secure communication that is decentralized to a degree, but not entirely, that you can then use to bootstrap other kinds of decentralized communication. And that's very valuable. Diaspora is an example of a project that's trying to create a decentralized Facebook. I think that there is a lot of value in trying to do that. I do think that reactionary stuff is maybe not as good as it could be if people were thinking very creatively about it. So I like Diaspora, but I'm not always a fan of the fact that it's framed as sort of like the response to Facebook. I think we have to think about it in terms of how can we have systems that we run ourselves, simple, like it could be on our phone, where when someone wants to look us up, they don't ask Facebook for the data, they ask us for the data, and we say, oh, Dimitri wants my phone number. Yes, I want to share that with him. Technologically, that's possible. It just needs to be written in some cases, and in other cases it sort of already exists in the form of like Android QR codes where you can share your contact information directly and someone else scans the barcode. The Guardian project in New York City, which works very closely with the TOR project, is working to build a whole bunch of privacy tools. So for example, one of the things that they have done is ported Tor to Android. I helped Nathan to do that. And another important thing that they're doing is they built a Jabber client that by default, when it connects to jabber.ccc.de, it actually connects to the Tor hidden service over Tor and offers OTR. That's an alternative on an Android phone that works today. It's in the Google market. It's also free software, so you can build it yourself and you don't have to trust anybody. And I think that's a valuable alternative. Moxie Marlinspike wrote Text Secure, which is encrypted text messaging. It's, I think, really amazing because it means that one of the most surveilled mechanisms for communication, text messaging, which is really easy to analyze, all of a sudden the data that people and phone companies and governments are recording is now encrypted, and it's encrypted with keys that get thrown away at the end of the conversation, just like an off-the-record message. So now the data that they have is worthless. And I think that's a great thing. It's like use a channel of communication, which is supposedly free and open, to send messages that only have value for you, maybe. I mean, you have to be careful about the social relationships there, and Jabber, I think, is a lot better for that than SMS. But the fact that you can sort of recontextualize and actually secure an insecure medium, for the content at least, is very valuable. And there are free software implementations of all of those things. The Tor browser is available for people to be able to browse the web anonymously. Maybe all you want is location anonymity. Maybe you still want to use Facebook with it, and it will work. Facebook will know you're coming from Tor. They'll also maybe know what you assert is your real name. That can have a lot of value as well. And so those are a whole bunch of alternatives that no one even has to build. They already exist. People just have to choose to use them.